My name is GM Jesse Kraai, and today we are talking about the very interesting book, Attacking the Strongpoint by Igor Zaitsev. This book is an interesting historical document, but its real ambition is to talk about chess philosophy. And right away you might say, what do you mean by chess philosophy? Is that even possible? Let's begin with who Zaitsev was. Zaitsev had a very privileged position in chess history. He was a good player in his own right, but he got to be first Petrosian's second, and then for all the critical years, he was Karpov's second. So imagine those big matches with Korchnoi and then with Kasparov. You know, he was the man behind the scenes. And what this person would do, they called sometimes a trainer or an analyst, is they had to sit there and find new opening ideas. And nowadays, when we think about opening ideas, we think of a computer spitting out some variation that has a little venom in it. But for him, yes, variations are important, and he came up with some great ones. But more importantly, he wants to come up with what he would call an intelligent final concept. That means some kind of generalization about what's going on in the position that a player can then use and understand, or understand and then use, right? Okay, so very interesting position in chess history to be at that, juncture. And then, of course, we lead into the computer era with Kasparov. Now, let's talk a little bit of two things he says about computers that I think are both interesting and tell us a little about where he's coming from and why he needs some kind of chess philosophy. So first, he says, once you start doing computers, you accustom yourself, he says, to calculating variations instead of forming an intelligent final concept, right? Makes sense. We have this problem today as well. The computer doesn't understand your stories. When you're telling about this position, it doesn't get it at all, right? It devalues it completely. And then he says that with the computer, a computer will never match our deep ability to generalize and will thereby lose the life-giving gifts of chess's spirituality, right? And I get it. When I'm sitting there studying by myself without the computer on, it feels like I'm engaging in something spiritual. And I'd like to believe I am. It's very hard to articulate what that is. With the computer, though, if you imagine a game of chess as a game without stories, it's just variations, it's hard to know what's spiritual about it. So from this generation's point of view, from Zaitsev's point of view, it's very important then to say, oh, it's not just something I'm doing to be interesting to talk about philosophy. It's something I have to do for my soul. Quick time out here. Did you know that the dojo is an incredible site with tactics, a database, a community of people trying to improve, a training program? All of this is going on at our site. So go check it out. ChessDojo.club. Hit the link in the description. All right, so let's use an example to talk about some of the stabs Zaitsev's going to make about developing a chess philosophy. Okay, so a division he likes that a lot of players of his generation do is to divide chess into statics and dynamics. It's funny, in the American world, I feel like Silman in Reassess Your Chess talks a little bit about it, but it feels a little bit like an add-on, like something that he didn't know quite what to do with. And I don't even know if it's there in the first editions. In any case, statics and dynamics. With statics, we're generally talking about material, like material count, but more importantly for Zaitsev, the pawns. The pawns determine the statics of the position. And so in this position, as an example, black will say has the better static play, better pawn structure, right? And white has the better dynamics with the better development, piece activity, and better king. So one of the things then about that he is also going to try to do as a philosophical statement is define what we mean by strategy and tactics. And it's a little weird. I tried it out in our latest podcast with Kostya and David. We talked. It's called "Is Chess 99% Tactics?" We were talking about tactics and strategy. So I tried out this definition I'm about to tell you, and the idea is with strategy, you divide strategy into strategic and strategic and positional play. And strategic play is play with pawns. Right? If you are moving your pawns forward, changing the nature of the position, that is strategic play. By contrast, if you're just moving the pieces, we would say maneuvering or improving the pieces, then that's positional play, right? Similarly with tactics, what he's going to say is there are tactics and there's combinations. Combinations involve pawns and pawn captures, and you would say, well, what is that? Well, imagine you're calculating a variation and all this stuff is going on. It's not a strategic thing that you're doing because it's very time-based and you're going down a variation and the position's transforming. I think actually what we're about to look at is an example of that. Okay, so that's kind of the basics that you might find interesting or not, dividing strategy and tactics. What I find most interesting for myself, and maybe something I can use, is the title of the book's idea, which is Attacking the Strong Point. So before we get into it, let me describe how I have seen this particular position. I've looked at this many times. David Pruce gave a great review of this game, and then I will link that here. You can see it if you'd like. So in my estimation of the game, white is basically winning, except white has one problem. The knight is no bueno. It's not doing anything. So just my basic narrative of the position would be, hey, if we can do anything with that knight, then we're going to be doing great. You can see this pawn is working to kill the knight because black is behind so much in time. All right. So black plays c6, and now I want to try to, securing the d5 square, blocking the rook from the c7 square. And now I'm going to try to look at it from Zaitsev's point of view. We get this brilliant move played by Steinitz, d5. And for me, it's like it's all about bringing the knight in. But for Zaitsev, it's a different conception, and it's really to say, when black played c6, black declared d5 to be their strong point. And when we play d5, we are eliminating that strong point, right? You take it with the pawn, your pieces can't use it anymore, okay? So totally, we're kind of a reversal of story about what's going on in the position. Now, one of the challenges about the idea of attacking the strong point is it's not always immediately clear, like what is black's strong point? In many of the examples that Zaitsev gives, it's a crushing of a blockade. Like here we would talk about the d5 square being the blockade square for the isolated d4 pawn, right? But it's not every position has something like that. And in every position, he would like to believe that we can orientate ourselves on attacking the strong point. Now, you might say, oh, orientation, that's not philosophy. Nah, maybe not. I understand if you want to tell me that that's not philosophy. However, right, in chess and in chess books, one of the real challenge is to explain how you come up with ideas, what the story of the position is. And that's what's beautiful, maybe spiritual, about chess, is that we have these stories that we can tell ourselves, right? And it's very important because without a story, we might not find the move d5. We need stories to find beautiful moves like that. Okay, so I think what this would be an example of, this d5, is strategy, right? Because again, it's a pawn situation. We're changing the nature of the position with pawns, not positional play. To me, I don't know, that doesn't help me too much, honestly. Okay, now, one thing I want to do is just show an example of a position I'm kind of confused about, and that is this one. It just came to me in terms of thinking about the strong point, because I'm like, well, wait a second, like position like this, what is the strong point for black? You know, it's a real question for me because I've got these two bishops. I would say, some people would say white has a clear advantage. Some people, I think, might even go so far as to say white's winning. Either way, we've got a great position, but it's not clear to me what the strong point is. Maybe I could make a story about how eventually the bishops will control so much squares that it's the king. Maybe it's the black king will ultimately be a problem. Not so much that they will get immediately mated, but that we will be able to corral the king and limit its activity. But it's harder to talk about that as a strong point. It doesn't make intuitive sense to me. So what I'm trying to say is, I like the idea of the strong point. I'm working with this thing. I can imagine it as a very helpful way to talk about the position, because when you're sitting there playing and things are complex, you do need some kind of method to be like, all right, this is what's going on, and I'm going to try to make things work, because, you know, it's hard. And that's what all the words that we use in chess are, is they are about finding a path. At least that's my belief about what we are doing when we come up with words, strategy in various positions. Okay, let me go back to this position. And another thing that he says, that the computer, it's hard to understand from the computer's perspective, is he wants to say, and you can imagine how important this would be to an analyst, is that if we have the advantage, then there should be a conservation of that advantage. And so imagine the kind of advantage might change. It might go from a dynamic advantage to a material advantage. An advantage being up a pawn to sacking that pawn and then having an advantage of playing against the opponent's king, as an example, right? For the analyst, it's really important for him, because if you say that, then what it means is that if you were analyzing and you lost the advantage, then you need to go back. You need to go back, check yourself, and find out where things went wrong. Okay, so an example here is he actually goes back in this game, because I think king f7 instead of c6 is much stronger for black. He goes back in the game and finds a way for white to get an advantage, and it's an incredible series of variations, all found without the computer, right? And again, the kinds of things that the guy found, sitting there by his lonesome, sometimes with friends, right? Amazing. That's why he got to be Karpov's second, because he was able to find all these things. But it's a lost art, right? Nobody's sitting for days and days on a position anymore. I'll go over my own games and I'll sit on it a while, but it's not like I'm sitting on it with the sense that, like, oh, this is going to happen again in some game and I got to figure it out so that my sensei, not my sensei, but the person I work for can have success on the battlefield, right? Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Very interesting book. Even if you aren't into the idea of chess philosophy, maybe you don't think it's possible. Very interesting, I think, historical perspective on what the game is and why, for a guy like this, chess philosophy is important. I certainly believe myself I would like there to be a chess philosophy. I don't always find it easy to to articulate what we are actually doing and saying when we talk about chess philosophy. There it is. Though I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll link to the book in the description.